Good morning, everyone, or is it afternoon? I've kind of lost track of time. I'm Madalene, Mielke, President and CEO of APAICS, the Asian Pacific American Institute for Congressional Studies. Welcome to the return of our in-person Legislative Leadership Summit. We're excited to host you during the next 2 days as we have conversations on important issues that affect the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander community and the nation at large. During these discussions, APAICS aims to connect leaders from across industries while providing varying points of view for dialogue and an exchange of nonpartisan ideas. Every issue in this country touches the AA and NHPI community, from immigration, access to the ballot box, climate change, anti-Asian hate, healthcare, and many more topics. These policy discussions highlight the unique perspectives and challenges that affect this country from the Asian American lens. Before we begin, I would like to thank our presenting sponsor, Amazon, for their support, as well as partners Horizon Therapeutics, Meta, and State Farm. APAICS is incredibly fortunate to have a variety of support for what will be 2 days of dynamic discussions. We're also going green as much as we can. We have a downloadable program book, so please find the QR codes that link to the most updated version of the schedule and the bios of the speakers and panelists. Please check it out and share your thoughts by tagging APAICS on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram with hashtag APAICSLeads. Now it's my pleasure to introduce this year's Legislative Leadership Summit Honorary Co-Chair, Senator Mazie K. Hirono. I had the good fortune of working with Senator Hirono in my prior life as a political consultant, so I know how much she advocates for her constituents in Hawaii. She was elected to the Senate in 2012 and sworn in as Hawaii's first female senator and the country's first Asian American woman senator. She serves on the Armed Services, Energy and Natural Resources, the Judiciary, Small Business, and the Committee on Veterans Affairs. She is a longtime public servant, having served in the Hawaii House of Representatives, as well as being a former lieutenant governor and member of the U.S. House of Representatives. Please welcome this year's Legislative Leadership Summit Honorary Co-Chair, Senator Mazie K. Hirono.
Aloha, everybody. Wow, come on, you guys are, this is not that early, is it? We have to energize because these are challenging times, to say the least. And, we're all here to provide our voices, raise our voices, and provide leadership. It's great to see you folks because I know that we haven't had a meeting in person in 2 years, is it? Yeah. Okay, so I feel that with a group like this, I should just be able to talk, but I do have some remarks that I wanted to be sure to remember to cover. So I thank each of you for your advocacy. I know that many of you represent organizations, corporations, groups that are very much focused on issues that affect all of us, and I realize that the APAICS meeting or summit is going to cover a lot of areas, immigration, climate, etc. I did want to focus very much on the fact that we still have anti-APIA hate crimes rising in our country. And it's hard to believe that, excuse me, it was a year ago that the COVID-19 hate crimes bill was enacted into law. It was one of the first bipartisan bills that we managed to get out of the Senate last year. And this past Friday, I was at the Department of Justice because Attorney General was announcing some further efforts that they were making in really pursuing and eliminating as much as we can APIA hate crimes. And he made some announcements. One of the biggest announcement was partnering with the Department of Health and Human Services to really reach out into the communities where much of the, I think, efforts against hate crimes that target our communities should occur. And I just wanted to mention to you all that it's not just hate crimes that we are targeting with this legislation, but it was hate crimes and hate incidents. I know very few Asian people who have not experienced some kind of racially motivated discrimination. Raise your hands if you haven't personally experienced such a thing. So we know the word incidents in the bill was really important for me. When I was working on the draft of the language, the Department of Justice advised me to focus on hate crimes and to leave the word incidents out. But because I know that most of these kinds of targeting of our community do not necessarily rise to the level of crimes, it was really important that we understand the incidents that occurred to so many of us. Well, none of you raised your hands, so you've all experienced those incidents. So I'm really glad that at his during his remarks last week, Friday, that he made sure to talk about anti-APIA hate crimes and incidents. And every time he mentioned hate crimes, he mentioned incidents. Because as I said, that is a really important part of understanding the kind of discrimination that is targeting our communities. So it's been a year since this legislation was enacted. There's a lot that has been done and a lot more, of course, that needs to be done. And not just with regard to our community, but we just experienced the horror of the shootings in Buffalo and targeted discriminatory hate crimes in California and elsewhere. So this kind of partnering that the Department of Justice is doing with Health and Human Services, again, focuses our efforts in ways that are critical. And he also announced that for the first time ever that the Department of Justice will have a person who is very much focused on the language issues around these discriminatory acts. I think it's really important. Just the AAPI community alone consists of some 45 countries, over 100 languages, and a huge part of the low reporting of hate crimes and hate incidents have to do with language barriers. So this kind of a decision that was made by DOJ to appoint someone just totally focused on language communication is critical. I want to mention that as we experience the continuation of hate crimes against our community, but basically all marginalized communities, it does my heart good to sometimes run across articles that gives me hope. And one article that I ran into was Time Magazine's recent kids issue. I hope some of you read it. It's an entire Time Magazine issue devoted to what young people in our country are doing in their advocacy and their awareness. And this particular issue focused on a student named Mina Feder. She lives in California, and she was nominated as one of the finalists for this kids issue, which, by the way, featured an African American, a black young boy. I think he was in his teens. He was on the cover, and during COVID, he organized an effort to feed thousands and thousands of students. So Mina was also featured. And the reason she was featured is she is a middle school student, 13 years old in California, and she experienced a total stranger coming up to her mother, and her mother is Asian, and coughing in her face. Amina recognized this as a hate incident and decided to do something about it. Because I called Mina and I said, what made you put together this whole organization to fight anti-Asian hate crimes? And she talked about experiencing what happened to her mother, recognizing that this was a hate incident. So she first started calling out the xenophobia during a school assembly. And then she organized a rally, and she said she thought maybe 90 people would show up, but over 1,000 people showed up for the rally. And following the success of the rally, she launched AAPI Rising, a collective of middle school activists who are devoted to uplifting their community and stopping racial hate. So Mina was named a finalist for Time Magazine. So the activism of young people all across the country really gives me hope. Obviously, we have a lot more to do. That's why you are all here. And for the next 2 days, you'll be focusing on a lot of the other issues as well as the continuing rise in hate crimes against API, against our community. So I wish you the very best. I, of course, stand ready to continue to work with all of you, your organizations, and you as individuals as we go forward. There's a lot to do. Keep plugging away. And as soon-to-be Justice Jackson said, what we have to do is persevere. Aloha. Mahalo.
Thank you for your continued leadership and tireless advocacy, Senator Hirono. Let's give her another round of applause, please. Our next speaker is Congressman Ted Liu, who is also an honorary co-chair of this year's summit. He unfortunately is unable to make it today. He represents the 33rd Congressional District of California and is serving in his 4th term. He sits on the Judiciary and Federal Foreign Affairs Committees. Prior to being elected to Congress in 2014, he served in both the California State Senate and the California Assembly. He also served in the Air Force and recently retired in 2021. Please welcome remarks from this year's Legislative Leadership Summit, Honorary Co-Chair, Congressman Ted Liu.
Welcome to this year's Legislative Leadership Summit. I want to thank APAICS and its important role in increasing representation and participation for Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders at all levels of the political process, from City Hall to the halls of Congress. The Legislative Leadership Summit serves as an important opportunity to discuss national issues through the lens of the AA-NHPI community and to highlight AA-NHPI leaders around the country who are tackling our country's biggest challenges. This summit brings together policymakers, corporate citizens, and nonprofit representatives for bipartisan discussions that bring AA-NHPI issues to the forefront of the national debate. In the past year, a pandemic stretched our healthcare system to a near breaking point. Wildfires and hurricanes illustrated the dire threat of climate change, and anti-Asian hate reached historic highs. This summit is an opportunity to shed light on how these issues have impacted our communities and how change makers are trying to address them. We also need to do more to combat the many challenges facing ordinary Americans and to do more to acknowledge how the AA-NHPI community is affected. The next 2 days will showcase the voice of the AA-NHPI community by presenting diverse perspectives on how corporate America, AA-NHPI leaders, and elected officials can work together to solve the challenges facing our community and our country. The policymakers and business leaders you'll hear from will discuss healthcare demands placed on caretakers, growing diversity in industry, and growing diversity in government, and evolution of city planning and community building. COVID-19 changed the way our healthcare system operates and exposed some of its flaws. We need leaders equipped to respond with fresh ideas and to understand the experiences of AA-NHPIs in all walks of life. We're happy to be joined by the leaders who are paving the way for greater representation. We have seen small businesses and major corporations embrace the benefits of greater diversity in their workforces. We will hear from leaders on how it has impacted their success. Unfortunately, we have also seen vitriol directed toward Asian Americans, and we will hear from the leaders who stepped up to combat it. As a reminder, the former president used racist phrases like kung flu and engaged in racist rhetoric, such as telling minority members of Congress to go back to our country. Lastly, the pandemic demonstrated our need for togetherness and community. We have seen massive shifts in education, voting rights, and social justice that will inform policymaking in the coming decades. This summit will focus on ensuring all Americans have access to quality education, access to a ballot box, and access to equitable opportunity. These conversations are vital to ensuring AA-NHPI leaders and their perspectives are part of the national debate. As a co-chair of the APAICS 2022 Legislative Leadership Summit and a member of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, I'm excited to welcome you to this event. Thank you to APAICS for hosting this summit And thank you all for continued support of the AAPI-NH community.
Thank you for all the remarks, Congressman Liu. It's now my pleasure to welcome CAPAC Chair and APAICS Board Member, Congresswoman Judy Chu. She currently represents California 27 and serves on the Ways and Means Committee as well as the Small Business and Budget Committees. In 2009, she was the first Chinese American woman elected to Congress, and we're honored to have her here today and greatly appreciate all of her leadership in uplifting our community. Please give a warm welcome to CAPAC Chair, Congresswoman Judy Chu.
Good morning. As you heard, I'm Congressmember Judy Chu, Chair of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, or what we call CAPAC. As we continue to celebrate the diverse heritage and cultures of Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities all throughout APA Heritage Month, I'm thrilled to welcome you today to APAC's Legislative Leadership Summit. Thank you to Senator Mazie Hirono and Congressman Ted Liu for serving as co-chairs of this important event. They both are integral to CAPAC's work in advocating for our communities and have always been champions for all AAPI issues. I was thrilled when APACS first began the tradition of hosting this summit a few years ago. And I am so pleased that after 2 long years, we are finally able to join together in person again to learn from subject matter experts. AAPI elected officials, community leaders, and corporate partners will be talking about so many issues that are of critical importance for our communities, from voting rights and climate change to AAPI representation and civil rights and racial profiling. But this is a special year in which to have this summit. A pandemic stretched our healthcare system to a near breaking point in the past year, changing how our healthcare system operates and exposing some of its flaws. Wildfires and hurricanes were more prevalent and extreme than ever, illustrating the threat of climate change. And anti-Asian hate crimes and incidents reached historic highs at 11,000 such crimes and incidents. The pandemic caused challenges for many ordinary Americans, but we need to know how the AA and NHPI community is affected. And that knowledge is what this summit can provide. This summit can play such a major role in bringing together so many prominent voices. We can engage in meaningful discussions about how our communities are affected and how we are advocating for ourselves. And I'm so proud to see that for the first time, this year's summit will feature the inaugural class of APAC's Racial Equity Fellows presenting their work that will move our communities forward. And in just a few minutes, this summit will begin with a plenary discussion on the state of immigration policy for AAPIs, an issue that is so crucial for our communities. In fact, 71% of Asian American adults are first-generation immigrants, and Asian Americans make up 27% of America's foreign-born population. The issue of the terrible backlog that we have is of critical importance. And by 2055, Asian Americans are expected to be the largest immigrant population in the United States. With such a diverse community, there are so many immigration issues critical to AAPIs, and it's my pleasure to kick off this plenary discussion now. So thank you to APAICS and your incredible president and CEO, Madalene Mielke, for inviting me to join you this morning. Congratulations on another wonderful legislative leadership summit, and happy Asian Pacific American Heritage Month.
Thank you so much, KPAC Chair Chu. We really greatly appreciate all the work that you have done to advocate for our community. It's now my honor now to introduce to you Glenda Beach, representing State Farm. She is also an APAICS board member. I like to think of her as my second sister, since we are both from Vietnam. Born in Saigon, she speaks fluent Vietnamese, which I wish I could do. She has a JD from Brandeis School of Law, University of Louisville, and is a fellow of the Asian Pacific American Women's Leadership Institute. Please welcome Glenda Beach.
Madalene, thank you. It's an honor to be recognized as a sister with you. And thank you to all of our esteemed speakers that came before me. As you heard, my name is Glenda Beach. I'm currently Vice President of Agency Sales with State Farm Insurance, housed in Dallas, Texas. I also have the honor and privilege of serving as a board member for the Asian Pacific American Institute for Congressional Studies on behalf of State Farm. So let me first to commend CEO, President, and Sister Madalene for making, and her incredible staff at APAICS for making this in-person legislative summit possible. 2 years ago, wow, how different it is today. Good afternoon and welcome to each of you. It's wonderful to see you. What an exciting time for us to come together after being away. On behalf of over 78,000 State Farm agents and employees, we are pleased to support the 2022 Legislative Leadership Summit, and we're privileged to partner with APAICS as they provide a forum to convene subject matter experts, AA, NHPI elected officials, community and corporate leaders, and key stakeholders who have bipartisan policy discussions on a variety of issues affecting our AA, NHPIs, and really the entire nation. When I saw the schedule of planned topics, I was so impressed with the intentionality behind developing these important and relevant sessions. I'm thrilled to hear the panel conversations and look forward to listening to diverse experiences, thoughts, and perspectives. This inclusive approach is incredibly important as we work to address important matters facing our community. State Farm is committed to longstanding and meaningful subject to diverse people and diverse communities. Since our company's beginnings, in fact, June 7th will celebrate our 100th anniversary as an organization. State Farm has personified the good neighbor philosophy with our employees and customers in numerous ways, such as supporting organizations, initiatives, and causes where our employees and agents live and where we do business. For 100 years, we have helped people in communities around the United States. In doing this, we strive to partner with organizations like APAICS that share our vision and commitment to building stronger, better educated, and empowered communities. Once again, I'd like to thank and applaud APAICS for their flexibility and ingenuity over the past couple of years. Through the next couple of days, I challenge everyone to commit to taking away a key learning, something you will do differently that will help the communities that you live in and you serve to become stronger. This is how we will become better. Thank you so much for the invitation to be a part of this opening plenary. Please enjoy the remainder of the summit and your lunch. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much to all of our wonderful speakers. We greatly appreciate all of your remarks. I hope all of you will enjoy your lunch as we get ready for the plenary speakers.
It's a little long.
Pull up the stage. Testing.
Great, it's working.
Great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. All right, you should have had some lunch already, so you should be kind of, waking up on this early Monday. But welcome. My name is Irene Bueno. I'm the moderator today and have been involved with APAICS for a very, very long time, since the very beginning, so I'm so happy to be here. The last couple years, I've been moderating Zoom panels, so I'm happy to actually see people in person, but I have to go like this now. I just can't, see hands up. So this is going to be a little bit challenging for me, but I'm just so happy to be here, and we are joined by experts in the field on immigration. Immigration is something that is obviously a significant topic in the API, A and HPI community. I think everyone probably in this room has some personal connection to immigration, so we're just so thankful that we have experts among us who can talk about some of the immigration challenges that the A and HPI community is facing, what they're doing to address those challenges, and maybe what you all can do to help address those challenges. So I will start off by asking each participant to introduce themselves, tell us something a little bit about your organization, and then what I found out is that everyone has, like I said, a personal connection somehow or a professional connection to immigration. So I'm going to ask all of them to share a story. For myself, I'm a Filipino American. My parents immigrated here, and so immigration issues have been a big topic in our family. Also, I had an opportunity to work in the White House for President Clinton and worked on immigration issues, so I've been working on these issues for a while. So next, I'd like to introduce Ginny Kim, who is the Vice President at AAJC.
Thanks so much, Irene. And thank you, APAICS, for having us here. So a little bit more about me. Ginny Kim, Vice President for Policy and Programs at Asian Americans Advancing Justice, AAJC. We're a national nonprofit 501c3 advocacy organization with a mission of advancing and promoting civil and human rights for Asian Americans and building and promoting a fair and equitable society for all. Telling a personal story with regard to immigration, something that, growing up in an immigrant community, I realize is actually a quite common story, is that I was an undocumented child. And under the 1986 Immigration Reform and Control Act, my family received amnesty. We, in fact, were the 250,000th family in the Southwest region that covers LA and surrounding parts to receive amnesty under that law. And fun fact, there was a whole splashy article in USA Today with my dad and my baby sister on in a picture back in 1987. And so it's full circle for me to come back and be working on a number of different policy areas, including immigration, here at AJC today.
Thank you, Jenny, so much for sharing that story. I want to see the pictures. Next, we have Kham Mua, who is the National Political Director of the Southeast Asia Resource Action Center, or CRAC. So, Kham?
Thanks, Irene. Ooh, this is loud. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kham Mua. I'm the Director of National Policy at CRAC. We're a nonprofit civil rights organization based in DC that focuses our advocacy work on refugee communities from Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam. Our portfolio spans from immigration to education and health policy, but I oversee the entire sort of portfolio that we work on. With regards to my own story, I don't say this often, mostly because it's already been so public, but I'm a refugee. I was born in the Phnan Ninh Khum refugee camp in Thailand in 1989. My parents are Hmong refugees who escaped from Laos when the Pathet Lao tried to exterminate the Hmong folks who allied with the US government during the secret war in Laos. I, like many of the people who we work with, am a direct result of my parents' escape. And, it's because of their allyship with the US and their experiences that I'm here today. So I spent most of my life working with refugees. I started when I was still a high school student working with Karen, Bhutanese, and Burmese students in Minnesota. But I've dedicated my career to advancing the rights of Southeast Asian refugees because of the many, many barriers that they face, because of the trauma that they continue to carry with them from the war and genocides that they face. So that's sort of why I'm here today, why I do this work.
Thank you so much, Com, for sharing your story. Next, we have Kenzie Laqueste. She's a project manager at Forward.us.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kenzie Lasesti. I work at Forward.us, and we're a nonprofit organization that works on policy advocacy for immigration and criminal justice issues. Background about myself, I was formerly undocumented without DACA. I migrated here from the Philippines when I was 7 years old, and since coming out of college, I've been working on immigration and kind of dedicating my life to it and my community. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you so much, Kenzie, for sharing your story. Next, we have Megha Lama, who's a senior immigration organizer for Aajc.
Thank you, and thank you so much, APAICS, for organizing this. My name is Megha Lama. I'm a senior organizer for Aajc, and I focus mostly on immigration. I am a Nepali-speaking individual who has migrated from different countries, from India to, my parents migrated from India to Nepal and now to US. I moved to US in 2006 when my parents got asylum. So that is like my background for why I'm connected to immigration. Aajc has been working since 2005, advocating for the Nepali-speaking community. And we have been doing a lot of direct services. Our focus mainly are low-income workers, mainly domestic workers, nail salon workers, gas station and Uber drivers, and a lot of convenience stores, 7-Eleven, all of that. We actually give direct services to a lot of immigration issues, health insurance, language justice being a very center part of our work as well. I focus mainly on TPS holders, which is a temporary protected status holders, and we've been organizing, we're the only organization that is leading the fight for Nepali TPS holders in the federal level. And that's about it. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So as you can see, we all have different personal connections to immigration, and there's different personal stories and how we got here and what has motivated us is all a little bit different. So let's get kind of into what you are all doing on the issues that are facing the AA and HPI community on immigration. Immigration has been difficult. I think probably 1986 was probably the high point, but pretty much since then, it's been difficult to get any kind of positive immigration legislation passed or any policies passed, and actually it's probably moved in the other direction. So what I'm interested in hearing from all of you is, what are some of the issues that you're working on that addresses some of these challenges, and what are your organizations doing to address the challenges? Start with Ginny. I'll just keep going down the line.
So we at Advancing Justice work primarily on three big prongs of the immigration issue. One is the first and foremost priority is family migration. Family migration impacts the Asian American community broadly. It is the widest pathway through which Asian immigrants arrive in the United States, and something like, I think 82% of visas given out to Asian nations, Asian countries, are family-based visas. And so it's the primary vehicle through which Asian immigration happens into the United States. So on that front, we have been working on a broader approach to change the way we think about immigration, not just in terms of workers and who has merit to enter the United States, who brings economic benefits to the United States, but broadly working on changing the narrative around our immigrant communities are based in immigrant families. So we have a campaign called the Value Our Families campaign. Advancing Justice Aajc, along with our Advancing Justice affiliate, Asian Law Caucus, Advancing Justice Los Angeles, Chicago, Atlanta, all lead it together alongside Church World Service and NACASAC. And members like, COM and others from CIRAC and many other organizations and Forward's a supporter and Aajc, we all work together on changing the narrative about immigration and pushing for family immigration policy. So what does that mean? That means working on, number one, what should be a quote-unquote easy fix but has seen so many political obstacles is visa recapture. Over the last decades, we've lost so many visas that should have been issued under, through family-based immigration, but because of administrative and bureaucratic delays, there's something like 400,000 visas that we are trying to recapture right now through both legislative and administrative fixes, including 122,000 that just got lost to COVID-related delays, right, just in the last 2 years. These are visas that could be issued to reunite families who've been separated for decades because, stats like if you're trying to petition a sibling from the Philippines, it takes 20 years, right? The visa backlogs are horrendous. And so, we're working through legislative vehicles like the Reuniting Families Act that Representative Judy Chu has introduced. We're working through appropriation strategies and administrative strategies to ensure that we can get our family immigration system fixed.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jenny. Com?
At CIRAC, we focus primarily on restoring due process protections to the immigration enforcement system. There are over 15,000 Southeast Asian Americans who currently live with a final order removal, primarily for previous convictions from decades ago. It's not a super popular issue, but it's an incredibly important one because many of these individuals have families, they've served their times, they're often frontline workers in small businesses or in large corporations, and they're often pillars of their communities. So when these folks are removed, you're not just removing the individual, you're removing the primary breadwinner, you're removing someone's father, you're essentially re-traumatizing these families and taking already primarily low-income families and making them face housing instability, food instability, economic instability. We work on a variety of other issues as well, but for us, that's the primary issue areas that we've been working on. And a lot of this is about addressing the 1996 immigration laws that have created the current immigration enforcement system that does not allow very many options for people to find relief when they suddenly find themselves deportable. For our communities, the reason why so many folks became deportable is because of an overzealous policing system in the 90s when we had tough on crime policies that focused primarily on Black and brown and minority communities, and also because of a variety of other issues that they face, from being able to access public services, from being able to address mental health services. One of the individuals that we worked with, he went to school and he constantly woke up with nightmares because of PTSD. I mean, he watched his brother die, he escaped with his mother, and when he went to school and his school counselor was asking him about it, what they did was send them to ELL classes. It's a story that we see frequently in our communities, individuals who have not just their own trauma, but trauma that they inherit from their parents that's unaddressed. And so they have very few outlets for it when they're already living in low-income communities. And realistically, it's more likely that a cop will see them before a mental health professional. And so that's why there are so many people in our communities who are facing removal today because of a past conviction. What we're trying to do is make sure that we can restore due process so that folks who are facing removals can go to a judge and say, I've turned my life around. I have a wife. I have US citizen kids. I own a nail salon in Florida. And I should be given a second chance because I have done everything I can. But the current system that we have today doesn't allow for that. It's part of the reason why CIRAC and other partners, like pretty much everyone up here on this stage, is fighting for reforms like the New Way Forward Act in the House. The other thing I do want to also say is that immigration is a bipartisan issue. Southeast Asian deportations is a bipartisan issue. You know, we just recently helped introduce the Honor Our Commitment Act, which would protect Vietnamese refugees who arrived in the U.S. before July 12, 1995 from deportations. It's a bill that, you know, has Republican and Democratic support, and we can win. You know, in some of our work, you know, we've seen small victories this year. For example, the previous administration placed an ethnic immigration ban on Laos that lasted for 2 years. You know, our communities were able to lift that immigration ban. So it's, you know, that's what we focus on. It's difficult, but we can win, but it's hard.
Thank you. Well, that's promising. Kenzie?
I agree, it's very hard. So at Forward.us, our sort of North Star goal is to win a pathway to citizenship for all undocumented immigrants. And so within that big bucket, we have sort of two main buckets of immigration work. One is focused on our border and asylum policy work. And then the other side to it is winning the pathway to citizenship. It's a big fight, and I think one of the things that we are trying to advocate for and that we're anticipating right now has to do with DACA and DACA litigation. In the next month or two, I think, it's going to be challenged at the Fifth Circuit, so we're preparing to sort of educate our audience about that, what that means for DACA recipients, and getting ready to fight once again. But yeah, I think part of my work as a product manager is working in our digital campaigns team and trying to educate our audience about these policies that are happening, trying to make that accessible through this website called informedimmigrant.com. And on the other end of that, when we are ready to fight, creating tools for our audience to make it easy for them to reach out to their congressperson and advocate for these issues. But yeah.
Thank you so much. Megha?
So I think most of our organizations have already mentioned around, you know, what exactly immigration and where things are. Our fight for especially TPS holders and DACA or Dreamers is actually, you know, that's been pending, right? We have been working on this since, I would say, really like 2015, 2016, and especially, you know, when Biden took the administration and, you know, we had like all the Congressionals that were Democratic, right? Senate's Democratic, and we were like, whoo, we're gonna win this fight, and you know, let's start with the reconciliation. Like all that hope and all that fight kind of like took a big step, and we actually gave all of our strength and efforts to work towards pathway to citizenship for all immigrant community, right? Essential workers. We added TPS holders, DACA. We added undocumented folks, 11 million undocumented folks in the list. However, you know, that hasn't really gone anywhere, right? We're still like waiting on Biden administration to do something, waiting on Democratic Congressional to do something. And I think for now, we are just like tired and frustrated. Our folks are tired. There has been like a lot of incidents even within the TPS community, which I can speak of, is like, you know, a lot of mental health issues has been crawling up because they just have to think about what they're going to do in the next 3 months, what they're going to do in the next 6 months, right? That is not something that, you know, as a human being, we want to deal with when we are in like the U.S., which is United States of America, right? That, you know, the American dream that everyone just came with, and, you know, all the individuals that were thinking about, you know, this is where, you know, I want to have my family settled. I want to, you know, live the big American dream. But I think when you come here and you realize that the immigration system, which hasn't been really worked on, is actually a huge deal, and that kind of sets a lot of our communities back to like exploited, working environment, right? Healthcare access, which we cannot get it because of the immigration status, right? A lot of resources or the basic needs that you require, even within COVID. I think a lot of states, I'm from New York. In New York, we had to keep fighting in order to get COVID tests, in order to get appointments for our community, in order to get unemployment insurance. So for the rest of the states that, that we say that it's not even like democratic, like I wonder how the situation is. So that is kind of like, the reality of immigrant community. And I think for us, yes, the fight is not over, and we've shifted towards more doing like administrative advocacy for TPS holders. But also, I think we've been just pushed from DHS to Biden administration to then back to Congress and back to, all different agencies. And we're not getting like the right answers from anywhere. And we've just been like, you can hold off because the decisions are gonna be made, but we don't know when, right? So that's the reality, and I think like most of our, advocates have also shared, and like back in 2019, when HR 6 was introduced, and we were all like, cheering up, there was some compromises made within the DACA bill. There was a language that was excluding a lot of communities. That's when, we were working with CRAC and all of these communities that were not, for the HR 6, that wanted to have a bill that does not exclude folks, with the criminal backgrounds that we kind of like, or the Congress has kind of set forward, right? So I think there's a lot of work to be done, and it's not easy for just being, doing the groundwork. I think there has to be bold steps that need to be taken within the Congress, within the Democrat folks, Senate and the House, both. And we need to have more like policy people, taking bold steps who are working on the Hill, right? Because we are advocates. Yes, we can be like creating leadership of all our immigrant communities and, let them know that, yes, it's going to happen, but it takes time. Immigration, this is what it is. But at the same time, I think it takes much effort and work on the Hill and from the Congress that, we have elected.
Well, thank you all for laying out what your organization is focused on. There's a lot of issues that need to be addressed in immigration, and I know it's very frustrating, but, I've worked, like I said, I worked in the White House, worked on the Hill. We need to hear your voices, even though you feel like it's not going anywhere. You need to continue that drumbeat, and hopefully, like you said, not just the Democratic or Republican, everybody needs to hear what needs to be done. So I just thought, in the meantime, until we get these policies changed, what are some of your organizations provide direct services to the NHPI community? Can you talk a little bit about what you do in providing some of those services and help?
You want me to start?
Sure.
Oh, okay. So we have been doing a lot of, as I mentioned, direct services on legal stuff, which is TPS holders, ask a lot of questions around, what are the application forms that I need to fill out, like EAD forms, right? Those are like the very important ones. But at the same time, a lot of TPS holders also want to move back to the country that they're from, and, they want to be able to travel so that they can see their families back home as well. So the travel document, the advanced parole, all that issues. Then we also do a lot of health insurance applications because for health insurance, in order for you to get health insurance, you have to go through a lot of big process. We all know it's not easy to understand. Even I don't understand myself, right? Being able to read and write English. So for a lot of Nepali-speaking community who have limited literacy in English and in the language which is Nepali, it is not easy to follow the health insurance. Then we also do a lot of English classes because for us, in order for them to go to work and be able to communicate with employers, it is important for them to understand basic English. So we do English for Empowerment, where we are also providing a lot of the Know Your Rights sessions incorporated. These are very basic ones, but as Nepali community, we're the only ones who are actually in the social justice and social service work. It's almost like a 911 and 311 calls that that we kind of get. There is also, during the pandemic, we also had to do a lot of unemployment insurance benefit applications. That took a lot of work. It was not easy. A lot of members from our community were not able to access the forms online because it was in English. And they were directed to also take a lot of telephone, applications, which did not actually have like a Nepali speaking language access. So there were a lot of communities-based organizations that were, stepping up in order to fill out the form virtually or on the phone, or being like safe outside and outdoors during the pandemic. So these are like just the basic, but there's a lot more that as a community-based organization you end up doing for the members.
I think I'm running close to time, so I'm going to go to the last question. We have 10 minutes? Okay. Well, does anyone else want to answer that before we kind of go to the next question?
I could answer just super quickly. Yes. We don't do a lot of direct service work. I can never speak justice to the work that our local partners do with our community members. But as a DC-based organization, what we help our refugee and immigrant communities do is we bring them here. Because of the support of organizations like Advancing Justice, State Farm, we're able to make sure that refugee and immigrant communities are able to navigate DC and to speak power to truth in front of their legislators. So that's what we do most immediately for them.
Thank you so much. So the final question, we've talked a lot earlier today with Senator Hirono and Congresswoman Chu about anti-hate. And so the last question, or one of the last questions I have, depending on how much time, what has been the impact on anti-hate or on hate crimes and issues on the A and HPI communities that you serve on related to immigration? Judy?
So if we want to go back prior to 2020, right, when, the first reports of COVID coming out in December 2019, and then in January and then February, we see the first reports of anti-Asian hate coming out in terms of individuals being scapegoated and blamed for this virus. And it wasn't a surprise for those of us working in the anti-hate space, because this happens every time there is either a geopolitical tension, an economic tension, or some other issue where those of us who are otherized, made to look perpetually foreign, etc., are always the first to be blamed. Now, we can just go back a little bit further. Like, anti-Asian hate is an extension of xenophobia and anti-immigrant sentiment. It's one and the same. And if you go back to the run-up to the 2016 presidential campaign, that's when we saw a huge spike in anti-immigrant hate crimes, anti-Muslim, and anti-Asian hate at the time, alongside anti-Black and other types of white supremacist racist action. And so these are all very much tied together: anti-immigrant sentiment, anti-Black sentiment, anti-Asian sentiment. And we saw those numbers rise in 2016. And then, by 2017, you had an explosive number of hate crimes targeting minority communities, period. But, when it comes to immigrant communities in particular, it's incredibly difficult, because in the Asian American space, we lack the infrastructure and investment at the local level. I mean, you heard about all the things Megha talked about that Aajc does. And Aajc is one of our strongest partners on the ground locally. But think about all the places where there isn't an Aajc. Think about all the places where there aren't resources. And if you look at, their numbers that APIP released prior to 2020, around 0.2% of all US philanthropic dollars went to Asian American community serving organizations. That's 1/5 of 1%. And that's the level of underinvestment at the local level that's happened for so long. And so one of the strategies that Advancing Justice has been really prioritizing is investing in local infrastructure, sub-grants, resources, trainings, advocacy trainings, communications trainings, other trainings, as well as funding to enhance the ability and capacity of local organizations serving the local communities, whether it's dealing with victims advocacy and mental health services in the wake of anti-Asian hate, or immigrant rights advocacy, or immigration, direct services, legal services, etc. We know the local community organizations on the ground are the experts in the communities they serve. And so we need to resource the communities, but that infrastructure, right, service infrastructure is extremely under-resourced right now. And that's something we are working really hard through, whether it's through implementation and appropriations of the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act to get more funds into local communities. There's a lot we need to do, and that's one strategy that we're prioritizing right now.
Thank you. Kham?
Southeast Asian refugee communities are no stranger to anti-Asian hate. In 1989, a grown white man walked into a elementary school in Stockton, California, and opened fire and killed 5 Southeast Asian children and injured 29 others. It's a narrative that continues to pop up again and again, like Jenny has said. It's a difficult conversation for us. I think the feelings and the sentiment from our communities is very real. I think people are hurting. People are looking for catharsis. But at the same time, one of the things that we have been seeing is a call for increased punishment, a call to sort of move back to a era of tough on crime, local and state policies that have decimated our communities, that have led to our families being separated permanently for many. At CRAC, we fundamentally believe that when people are given the opportunity, that they have the capacity for transformation and growth. We've seen it with the individuals that our partners have worked with in prisons. We've seen the changes in Southeast Asian youth who, are in prison for assault or for more horrendous crimes, who by learning about their histories and their communities come out of prison 10 years later, a significantly changed person who is reaching back into the places where they're from and helping organize some of these efforts to push back against anti-Asian hate. So it's a difficult balance for us. And one of the things that we're trying to figure out right now, and one of the challenges that we face, is how do we recognize and how do we, make sure our communities can stay safe locally and feel safe in their homes and on their streets, but also prevent our country from moving into another round of policies that have demonstrably hurt our communities and our people. And it's concerning because it is an election year. And historically, we see that election years, bring out hard-on crime solutions and ads and narratives. And it hurts our communities more than it helps. It hurts immigrant communities. Because the reality is that immigrants and refugees deserve to be seen for their humanity. They deserve second chances. They deserve every right to be here and to live with their families. Sometimes it's just a little bit more difficult. Sometimes they just need help getting back up on their feet. And they should have that chance, and that's something that currently doesn't exist in the US right now.
Thank you, Kham. Kenzie?
I do want to echo what Jenny said about how anti-Asian hate and violence has always been happening, even before 2020. And so with that being said, it's really tiring and exhausting to see this happen again and again. And now that we're in a very digital space, everything is now seen online. We're kind of overexposed to all the violence that's happening. And although this visibility is really great so that the rest of America could see what's happening to our communities and can invest the funding and invest the time and commitment to help out our communities. At the same time, there's people like me, there's people like us who are mentally and emotionally exhausted from seeing this again and again. I think about like my family, I think about my friends, I think about my community who's in danger every single day. But I think what gives me hope is just creating a space with my community and like acknowledging that this hurt is happening within the workspace, right? We all work in the immigration space. I think we can all agree that this work is already really challenging and exhausting to continue fighting for immigration. And at the same time, all of this violence is happening within our communities. So I think it's important to take a break, to acknowledge that, and to just hold your family and friends, all your loved ones close, because life is really short. And I think we need to spend a lot of our time leading with love and compassion. And I think community education is also really important, even outside of the AAPI community, just like acknowledging that this violence is happening and that we all need a break. And yeah.
Thank you so much, Kenzie. Megha?
Thank you for mentioning everything that our friend said here. But I can just speak on how we are handling these situations within our organizations is we're actually talking to members, right? It is not easy to talk about these things, but we are actually sharing space, creating space where they can acknowledge, understand, and also in the meantime, like the immediate needs, what are the needs for the community that we can do as advocates, as members of the community? That's what we've been doing, which means, you know, talking about their mental health space, talking about how can we provide maybe a taxi service if folks are afraid to go to work, right? Providing maybe like or advocating for, on behalf of our workers to the employers on how they're feeling and how they cannot go to work, right? These are very like immediate needs that we can actually work on, and that's what we've been doing. On the other hand, we also have a lot of nail salon workers who've actually been facing all of these hate crimes within their workplaces. And I think one of the things that actually our own members came up with is the idea of, you know, let's take up space in like parks. Let's do Zumba dance, right? Let's do a breathing exercise, very simple ones, but something that doesn't need some experts or wait for some experts to show up and, you know, talk about the mental health or, you know, what can we do? But these are like very basic steps that our members kind of came up with, and they started going to the parks, taking up space, right? We are here to be seen, to be heard. They're sharing stories in a lot of spaces that, you know, they're not usually doing. We're also, within the spaces, we're also talking about anti-Blackness issues that happens within the Asian American community, because anti-Asian hate and anti-Asian, you know, not just talking about anti-Asian health is going to solve all the issues that is happening since years and years. And I think, you know, Kam and Chini can also share about that, right? Like how long we've been fighting the anti or hate crimes and anti-Blackness within our own community. So we're doing that through our political education as well. We're bringing folks who have been working on these issues to kind of shed light on, you know, why we have to think about anti-Blackness within these kind of realm of understanding the hate crimes that's been happening as well. it's very complex, right? Because in New York, like, you know, different communities are attacking different communities, right? Like Black community attacking Asian, Asian and Asian. So that it's very complex to really understand, but at the same time, how do we acknowledge all of the things, but also finding the root causes that can help us solve these issues, and not just thinking about now, but for the long term, maybe, you know, working on various ways to combat these, and providing political education within the communities, not just like Asian community, but, you know, bringing all other communities together to do more deeper political education, so that we can actually start working on this ahead of time and not wait for like some crisis to happen to do the work.
Thank you. I think when I asked that question, I wasn't sure of the range of answers, but I think it addressed, you know, the issues of the lack of funding from foundations to API organizations, especially locals. It, you know, addressed issues of mental health. That's not an issue that I think a lot of people don't want to talk about, but particularly in the API community, we don't want to talk about that, and that is forcing us to talk about it. And then people realizing that they have to, like you said, take up space, show their power, be seen. So if we can say there's any positive consequences to anti-hate, this is something that I hope will, like you said, lay the foundation so we don't have to be in crisis every time this happens. So I think I really am toward the end. So I'm going to use this time to ask everyone just to find any final comments, any calls to action. So I'll start with you, Jenny.
So I know that the immigration battle, or battles, you know, they're cyclical. We feel like we're making progress, and then, you know, there's another letdown at the legislative level. And it's cyclical, and those of us who have lived through multiple cycles of comprehensive immigration reform, et cetera, we're like, okay, this is a recognizable pattern. But I also want to remind folks that although we see some incremental gains, a lot of them become the foundational rights upon which we continue building. For instance, DACA. They tried to take it away and they continue trying, but we're fighting to keep it, right? Every time you're able to get an incremental win, grab it, hold it, move forward. Don't lose sight of that horizon line. You can do both that transformational thinking toward a future where all immigrants have agency, where all immigrants have status, where all immigrants are equally American. But it doesn't also mean that you have to throw the baby out with the bathwater when you don't get everything you want, right? And so reminding ourselves we can do both, walk and chew gum at the same time, fight for both. And then the other piece is, you know, Megha, thank you so much for raising that issue of anti-Asian hate and anti-Blackness coexisting in the same place. There's a lot of misinformation and disinformation happening in this space, the viral videos that the media picks up. That is not the majority of the hate crimes that are happening when you see a Black assailant and an Asian American victim. That's what's sensationalized. And, you know, we are working on a misinformation, disinformation research effort as well to ensure that not only in the anti-hate space, but in the election space, in the immigration space, in the education space, that folks understand, I mean, in the context of anti-Asian hate, the overwhelming majority of perpetrators are white men. This is not something that people know. Multiple studies have shown this. And so just reminding ourselves that we need to actually dispel a lot of the myths that are happening and ensure that we're working cross-racially to build a future where all of our communities are safe. And that also includes, and I'll, call to action is long-term solution around whether it's anti-Asian hate or anti-immigrant sentiment is ensuring that all of us are seen as belonging. And that includes teaching of all of our histories inclusively, whether it's Asian American, Latinx, Black history, all of it together. And so that's another piece I want to lift up is we should all have our histories taught. We should all work toward a place where we all see each other as equally belonging and work together in solidarity.
Thank you, Jenny. Kham?
Everyone should have access to due process protections, regardless of their immigration status, or their previous convictions. No one should have to sacrifice their homes and their families in allyship to the U.S. in order to be recognized as someone deserving of dignity in the U.S. And as you and other folks begin to think about immigration reform and what solutions need to look like, we need to remember that everyone deserves respect, that they deserve second chances, and that those second chances should be given to immigrants and refugees as well.
Thank you, Kham. Kenzie?
I'd say my call to action would be for folks to connect to their local organizations who are doing all of the work, whether that's direct services or the larger policy work. And, connecting to these local organizations means building community as well. So I think that's really helpful in light of all of the hate that's happening within our community. And at the same time, it's also a space to continue educating yourself about these policies that are ongoing and are impacting our communities. It's also a space for you, or for all of us, to help each other in the ways that we can, whether that be through funding, through volunteering, and through other ways that we could create an impact in the immigration space.
Thank you, Kenzie. Megha?
I think for me as an organizer, I would say just organize wherever you are, whether it's workplace or, your home, right? You need to organize at your houses as well. It's not easy, but it takes time. But, you keep doing that. Of course, like education, political education is important. That's how I was also kind of like aware, right? If I didn't understand like the political and all this landscape, or even like the history of Asian American, or immigration history, right? All of this, if I hadn't understood those things, then I wouldn't be in this place. So yeah, continue educating, continue building, continue organizing. And I think we also have to include youth to these conversations, not thinking about like, they're not going to understand that, or like, if you are our parents, like, include them in these conversations. If you're youth, include your parents to these conversations, because that's how it all starts.
Thank you so much. It's really been an honor to be on this panel with you, or to moderate the panel. And I really want to thank you for all that you do, because, we know how hard it is. And so please, keep up the fight. And I hope that you all will get engaged and join these efforts to help them. So thank you so much.